Hey, what's up, everyone? This is David Greenspan, and I want to welcome you to Season 4 of the Mindshare Podcast. Additional podcasts are available at mindshare101.com and on all the major podcast platforms. This week's episode is sponsored by Kit's Keep in Touch Systems and the Buzz Conference. Now, make sure you connect with the Buzz Conference by visiting their website, www.thebuzzconference.com, and by following them on Instagram at the Buzz Conference to keep tabs on all the awesome events they host, along with getting the latest copy of the Buzz digital magazine. Now, quick note. Due to provincial legislations, the Buzz Conference has had to reschedule our live in-person Recharge 2022 event to March 31st. But they do have a complimentary virtual event still taking place on January 13th. Again, please visit their website and Instagram account to get all the details. And when's the last time you checked out the Kit's cross-channel marketing suite? This is your full-on marketing tool set, starting with Loop CRM to help keep you organized, the most personalized and effective direct mail newsletters, delivering response rates of over 35%, email newsletters, websites, social media content, our super easy 3-click landing pages, complete with automated action plans, and so much more to help you manage your business, generate more leads and more referrals, and build that mind share to drive even more sales. You can learn more on my site, mindshare101.com, by clicking on marketing. And as you know, we are on a push to get to 100 reviews on iTunes, and so I'd like to ask you, if you haven't yet, please take 2 minutes to rate the show and leave a review. And we're making this super easy for you. All you have to do is go to ratethispodcast.com/mindshare101. Again, ratethispodcast.com/mindshare101. And of course, as always, a big thank you in advance. Today's episode is number 162. He is responsible for analyzing economic developments and their implications for North American fixed income, equity, foreign exchange, and commodities markets. He also acts in an advisory capacity to bank officers on issues related to wealth management, household and corporate credit, and risk. Well known for his groundbreaking published research on topics such as labor market dynamics, real estate, credit markets, international trade, and business economic conditions, he not only contributes to the conversation, but also frequently sets the agenda. He has close to 20 years of experience in the private sector, advising clients, industry leaders, corporate boards, trade associations, and governments on economic and financial issues. National and global media regularly seek him out for his insight and analysis on economic issues that impact financial markets, consumers, corporations, and public policy. He is also a frequent lecturer in the economic programs of various Canadian universities. A member of the Economic Committee of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, the Economic Development Committee of the Toronto Board of Trade. He is also a member of Board of Governors of Junior Achievement of Central Ontario and a board member of the Toronto Financial Services Alliance. This week on the show, I am joined by Deputy Chief Economist for CIBC, Mr. Benjamin Tal. Benjamin, welcome to the Mindshare Podcast.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure to have you, my friend. I appreciate you making the time for us today, and we're very excited to have you on the show here. And, you know, I know looking at the schedule and the timing, and I want to roll right into it with you. With a variety of factors affecting our economy and staying focused on our audience being the real estate industry, which a lot of our colleagues are on the show today, let me set the obvious part of today's scene. Interest rates are set to go up. Inflation seems to not be transitory, and there is a large imbalance across the Canadian residential real estate market in the lack of homes of all types for sale. And during the recent federal election, all three parties seem to use the word intensification, aka more condos, as a magic wand solution. The thing, I'm not personally seeing how condos are the solution for the housing crisis unless they start building like much bigger condos. But question for you is, do you see inventory as a key reason for our continuing residential price growth? And is the solution going to be political or is it going to be market?
Yes, that's the key question. And the answer is absolutely yes. It's all about supply. For decades now, we have been trying to fight supply issues using demand tools, and it's not working. So we know that the issue is supply. 10 years ago, I was in a conference with the IMF. They asked me to come there and debate somebody. Mr. Greenspan was there, the former chair of the Federal Reserve.
That wasn't me, but I know who you're talking about.
Myron Schultz, a Nobel Prize winner in economics, was there. And it was a closed meeting, about 30 huge portfolio managers all over the world. And the theme, 10 years ago, the theme was short Canada, sell Canada. Why? Because the Canadian housing market is a bubble. That was 10 years ago. Since then, prices in Canada and in Toronto more than doubled. So much for forecasting. So clearly they were wrong. Why? Because they looked at the numbers without making sense out of them, without taking into account the growing demand and the insufficient supply that we see in Canada in generally, and in Toronto, Vancouver in particular. So therefore, the issue is supply. For the first time, politicians are starting to admit that they have to do something about supply. What is a different story? We have to build more. We have to build bigger. We have to share. We have to rethink housing, and we have to introduce a rental solution. It must be part of the solution. I want to see a situation in which you are 35 years old, you are married, you have 2 kids, and you are renting. Nothing is wrong with you. And the only supply of rental activity must be purpose-built rental, namely not condos, but apartment buildings, because that's the only way to attract families. Because if you have a family with 2 kids, they go to school, believe me, you don't want to deal with a landlord. You want to deal with a company. That's the new wave of renters, and the government must provide incentives to those builders to switch from condos to purpose build. At this point, I don't see it to the extent that we need to see it.
So we're all afraid of this word bubble, not just related to obviously the housing market, but the stock market as well. If we're in bubble territory, is there a soft landing coming?
The Canadian housing market is not a bubble. The way it was not a bubble 10 years ago. Given the demand that we have and the limited supply, what we are seeing now is making sense. Now, it doesn't mean that the market cannot adjust. In fact, I believe it will. Because what's happening now, we are borrowing activity from the future. Because we have to ask the following question. How is it possible that during this COVID business, during the recession, the Canadian housing market is up by 20-25%? How is it possible? And the reason is the asymmetrical nature of this crisis. All the jobs, not some, all the jobs that were lost were low-paying jobs. There were young people, there were renters, and that's why the rental market slowed down until recently. Which means that home buyers, potential home buyers, did not feel the crisis financially. In fact, they are better off. So if you think about it for a second, home buyers and potential home buyers are benefiting from what the recession can give you, namely extremely low interest rates, without the cost of a recession, namely a broadly based increase in the unemployment rate. That's the reason why the housing market has been so strong and still strong. There was this urgency to get into the market. And by doing so, you borrowed activity from the future. And therefore, I believe that the second half of this year, for example, might be a bit softer after people basically accelerated their purchasing activity to take advantage of low interest rates, especially given the fact that they know that interest rates are rising.
Okay, well, and we know that. And we know that the Bank of Canada, as well as the U.S. Fed, said that rates are going to be moving up here. Some's just posturing, Ben, trying to scare people into not borrowing. But let's assume it isn't just posturing. Will the old system be able to actually handle a rate increase without what we might call a quote unquote gut punch? Like, can today's homeowner actually afford a rate rise? I mean, one of my biggest questions that I've had for the past probably year, 2 years now is, where are people getting all this money? And there's something to be said about the fact that obviously with rates being so low, borrowing is possible. But I still, as we see the prices of houses go up, it's still the question of where are people getting the money to be able to pay that much? The carrying.
So let's start with this question,
right?
Yes, let's start with this question. First of all, where the money is coming from, and then we'll discuss this sensitivity to our.
Okay. This is the one that I've been dying to find out.
Yes. So first of all, yes, you're absolutely right. Interest rates are very, very low, so people take advantage of that. Despite the fact that we have the stress test, people still pass this stress test because of the fact that they simply can. And remember, they're relatively well off. This is not people that are struggling too much, given the fact that their job is there. So they haven't lost their job during the pandemic. They were Zooming, but still getting their salary. Their income, in fact, went up, not down. So that's one thing. Another, which is extremely important if you want to understand the real estate market in Canada, and especially in Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal, gifting. Gifting, namely parents writing a check. The family. Yeah. Until now, I said gifting, interesting, but not very interesting. You know what? It's very interesting because I look at the numbers. 1/3 of first-time home buyers now getting a gift. 1/3. Another 10% of mover-uppers are getting a gift from their parents and family. The average gift in Canada as a whole is $80,000. That's Canada. That's including PEI and other places. You look at Toronto, the average gift is more than $150,000. You look at mover-uppers. Wow. Mover-uppers, in places like Vancouver, the average gift is $340,000. That's a gift. That's a gift. So you want to tell me that this is not a factor impacting the housing market? Of course it is. And we have to be aware of that. And that's why I released a paper about it just a month ago, discussing the magnitude of this issue. It's a very big factor, a game changer. We are in the midst of the largest wealth transfer in Canadian history. And the way it works, by the way, is the following. You have 3 generations, people in their 80s and 90s, their kids in their 50s and 60s, and their kids in their 20s and 30s. And I believe that money is basically skipping a generation and moving to the young kids. That's basically the way I see the situation. So this gift is extremely important, a game changer. Add to it extremely low interest rates, and you have the reason why things are going so well for the housing market, maybe too well.
Now, is that domestic gifting? Is that foreign money? As we talk about the individuals who are getting the gifting, is
I don't think I can hear you now. Sorry, I miss
that money that is again coming from folks living in Canada, or is that coming from abroad?
I think it's a mix of both. Clearly, a lot of it is domestic money, simply a transfer of wealth from older people to younger people. But we'll see also a lot of new immigrants coming with money because they have money coming from their country of origin. So this is happening. The second part of this is the sensitivity to higher interest rates. There is no question about the fact that as a society, we are much more sensitive to the risk of higher interest rates since we carry so much debt. However, everything in real estate, in the housing market, is 5 years. The 5-year fixed rate, even variable, is 5-year fixed, yeah? Which means that you have to look at what happened to rates 5 years ago, because let's assume you have to renew your mortgage. You're existing home buyer, you have a mortgage, and you have to renew it over the next year or two. Interest rates will be rising. We'll talk about interest rates later if you wish. By how much and how quickly, that's key. But the interest rates will be rising. So if you look at where you are now, what you want to focus on was 5 years ago, basically when you sign your mortgage agreement 5 years ago. And 5 years ago, rates were relatively high because the Bank of Canada was raising interest rates in 2017 and 18, exactly 5 years ago. So in this sense, you have about 100 basis points, 1% to play with. Namely, if the Bank of Canada goes 100 basis points, you will not feel the pain because you're already there. So for the next 2 to 3 years, between 2022 and 2024, you are protected to an extent. At least you have some immunity. But if you took a mortgage in 2020, 2021, during COVID, when rates were very low, you're totally exposed. So the real vulnerability will be tested a few years from now if interest rates remain high after they start rising. That's more or less where we are. However, for new buyers, any increase in rates will be significant, and that's why we expect the market to slow down. And that's why, by the way, the market is accelerating now because people are trying to get into the market before interest rates go up. That's what we see all the time.
So I imagine at this point, then, to folks there that are going for the like lock in your mortgage rate, is that kind of the advice that maybe we're giving?
The gap between variable and between fixed and variable is extremely wide now, extremely wide. And the question is how aggressive the Bank of Canada will be. The market is now anticipating the Bank of Canada to move 5 times this year, 5 times, namely 125 basis points. I think it's crazy. I think it's too much. I think it's too rapid.
So is that going to lead to a major shakeup?
In which, can you hear me now? Because I still believe that we have issues.
Yeah, we can hear you. The screen seems to freeze. Yep, I can hear you. Absolutely.
Good. Yes. Perfect. So that's what counts. Therefore, we have to remember one thing, and people who listen to this try to recognize that every economic recession, a policy error in which central bankers raise interest rates way too quickly and basically kill the economy in the housing market. The 1991 housing market crash was basically the same story. Even the mother of all recessions in the US in 2008 was led or was triggered by the fact that before that, Greenspan, and again, not you, raised interest rates by, I think that if you do the math at this point, and you think about the next 2 years, where interest rates will be going, I suggest that the prime rate, therefore variable rate, will be rising by 150, 175 basis points. That's a reasonable guess. The 5-year rate already went up. I give it another 50 basis points. Given this environment over the next 2 years, do the math.
Right. Well, it'll certainly be interesting to see. And I mean, look, if I talk from a very, 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 very personal side, I myself will be, and much like most other millions of Canadians, watching that market and watching to what happens for those prices. We know that inventory is incredibly low at the moment, as we said. And so what happens, to the prices of homes over the next few years, certainly left to be seen, I imagine there. Now, there's a very wide held belief that, the capital gains tax is going to be adjusted. The federal income tax form has been asking for a number of years. Did you sell a home this tax year? Have you any thoughts on the federal government looking at continued tax-free status of principal residents?
The short answer is no. I think that they will go after a higher inclusion rate for capital gain for financial assets, but not for real estate. And the reason is that it will be a political suicide. I don't think that you want to do that as a politician. And if you do the math, in order to really make it effective, it has to be a very large number. Namely, the gain has to be a very significant number, and it will have to be only from here, not retroactive. Therefore, the actual increase in tax collection will be very, very low. And I don't see it as a winner for them. So I don't think there is an appetite to do so. I will be very surprised if they don't touch capital gain when it comes to financial assets, the stock market.
Well, I think that sheds some good news for many who've been wondering about that one very much. So now, we brought this up. You brought this up a few moments ago when we talked about that's been going on and the whole thing of COVID and people working from home and so where salaries have gone. But if the work in office style of going to work has changed forever, there's going to be even more economic disruption. Do you think that this is going to be a little blip? Or maybe a little bit of a longer-term disruptor for us?
Yeah, the question is, and that's a very important question, is to what extent COVID-19 is an event or a condition? And we have been asking this question for a while, and this event is turning slowly into condition. But when it comes to the nature of the economy, not the way we do things, but our output, namely the potential growth of the economy, I still believe that COVID will be an event as opposed to a condition. What I mean by that is that economic growth will be the same after COVID, but it will be produced differently. Namely, you will be doing more work from home, same here, but we will do the same thing simply from home. But it doesn't mean that our output will be different. So in terms of the potential growth of the economy, the ability of the economy to grow, that will be an event. But the way we do it, COVID will accelerate the process that started already. Every crisis is a trend accelerator. And this crisis is not very different. All this e-commerce business, e-health, e-education was there before. It was just accelerated in a very significant way. Working from home, even before COVID, about 17% of people were working from home. This number will be much faster, much larger. And therefore, I believe that in this sense, there will be a permanent change, but not in the way we produce things, just in the arrangement. That will be different.
You know what, I would look and say much the same when we look at even this way of communication, where we had this prior to COVID. This, again, it just amplified and sort of sped up the whole process of how many of us are leveraging it on a regular basis. So I certainly agree. And look, lots of reality checks here. Thank you. Great insights and some clues for, where the next steps are. So some sort of wrap up questions for you here. Where would you say is the silver lining? I mean, is there one?
No, I think there is one. And although the situation looks very bad now, it is better than it was a year ago. Because a year ago, none of us was vaccinated. We are vaccinated. We have this pill that people are talking about. We are making progress. The offense is getting better and better, but the defense is getting even better. So what I mean by that is that we are learning slowly to live with COVID. And at one point, and I hope this point will be by the spring, mid-2022, this pandemic will turn into endemic. So it's not an end game that you can put a day in the calendar that COVID is dead. It will not happen. We will be talking about COVID 5-10 years from now, but it will be something at the margin, the way you talk about the flu season. And you take a vaccine or a pill or something, and you live with it. It will not dominate your life. That's the way I envision the situation. And let's hope that it happens at one point in 2022. And again, we learn a lot about this virus. We have a lot of difference now, much better. So I see a silver lining. Unfortunately, we still have to go through the winter.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. I think that we're going to go through the winter. Look, if we look back to last year, I think we were in a very similar boat. We got into the new year as we started off the top today and said, we're walking into something where we're going to see some change. We're getting there. I do believe we're getting closer to that. And I think everybody is seeing that out there. So, looking ahead then, as we do look ahead in the year, what should Canadians be paying attention to this year as we move through this economic cycle that we're in at this moment?
Well, first of all, I think that it's a given that the first quarter of the year will not be something to write home about, economically speaking. It will slow down the way we saw the situation in the first quarter of 2021, and then it improved. I basically see a repetition of that. But in the background, what we have now that we didn't have back then is inflation. And that's something that I believe that any investor and anybody who's interested in the market or interest rates should look at. Now, let's face it and let's be very clear about it. Nobody knows where inflation will be 6 months from now. Nobody. And when I say nobody, I include the Fed and the Bank of Canada with that nobody. We're all pretending, but nobody knows. Therefore, what I mean by that is that inflation, at the end of the day, will not be the issue because the Bank of Canada and the Fed have the power to fight inflation. This power is higher interest rates. And the question is how high this cost will be. And that's the key question. How much it will take in terms of higher interest rates to bring inflation down. And it is true that inflation now is longer than expected. The Bank of Canada expected this supply chain issue to disappear by now. It's not happening. It will not happen until maybe the end of 2022. So we still have this issue. But the supply chain issue is really, at the end of the day, demand shock. Let me just give you one number, which I find very interesting. Mm-hmm. We know that people have been spending like there's no tomorrow on goods, not on services. So if you look at services, where it comes to spending, it's still below where it should be. If you look at goods, especially durable goods, it's 20-25% higher than where it should be. What it means, for example, in the US, listen to this. It means that if you take tomorrow 75 million people, new people, and parachute them into the US, and the minute they land, they start spending, that's what it means. 75 million people extra. That's what the demand shock that we have seen over the past year, because you press a button and you get your exercise bike. So I'm saying even a normally functioning supply system will have difficulties dealing with this demand shock. And this is not a normally functioning supply system. That's why we have those inflationary pockets that will die off eventually. The key issue to watch is inflation and wages and the labor market. Because wages are rising, we have this huge shortage of labor. We cannot find people. And therefore, wages are rising. That can be more inflationary down the road, and that's something to focus on.
Okay, very interesting. And as we talk about the ability to click those buttons, as we look at the fact that people are behind a screen clicking a lot of buttons and ordering a lot of product, what about crypto in Canada? And you know, sort of the tie into that being this idea that we've become very exposed to this idea of cryptocurrency. We've been seeing a lot of this talk through different outlets, especially this past year, and with everybody, you know, having the opportunity to maybe take a little bit more time to learn. Blockchain is a solid platform, but all these almost private style currencies. Are they fad? Are they fantasy waiting for a government or one of the big five banks to give legitimacy? What do we say about this?
That's a very good question, a very complex one, and the answer is not simple. The way I look at it, I separate the coin and the technology. When it comes to the coin, Bitcoins and all the rest, let me tell you, I couldn't care less. Zero interest. Zero interest.
Okay.
Because it's I don't know where it will be tomorrow. I really don't know. It's clearly a bubble because there is no value. There is no value. The only value that it has is is the other person willing to pay for. That's the only thing. Now, it doesn't mean that it cannot last for a long period of time. You know, a lot of people are very rich because of Bitcoins, and they might be even richer in the future. I don't know. I don't even care because the coin is not interesting. The technology is fascinating, and the technology is the future. And we see central banks toying with the idea of having electronic money because you have to compete with what's existing, but you also have to be in control. And therefore, the only future when it comes to Bitcoins and crypto is a regulated environment. I think that's the future. I think that's the way we are going. But it will be a very regulated industry and not the way it is now, that it's the Wild West. So again, the coin, not very interesting. The technology, fascinating.
Very interesting insights. It was definitely a question I was very, very interested to ask you. And I mean, one that I will not get into at this moment, but we talk about digital real estate and people buying actual digital pieces of land, we'll call it. And as you look back at it, you say, where is that actual value to it? But all in all, it's interesting to watch, and it's been, again, some wonderful insights into what we're looking ahead to for 2022, and I thank you for that. And now to kind of change up the flow of the actual question, I've got a question that I'd love to ask everybody who joins us on the show that is well outside the realm of dollars and cents and real estate and economics and very, very much more personal, but great insights from everybody that always shares it. And I'm curious to know from you, Benjamin, How do you know that it's been a successful day for you?
That's a tough one. You have to wake up in the morning, look for something else. And the way I look at it is that I'm here to help and educate, but I learn a lot. I listen to your questions. I realize, okay, that's what people are thinking about. Let me think about it. So basically, to me, a successful day is a day that I learn something new. And I try to do it every day. So every day is successful in this way.
I love the answer. I love it. I would tell you that, like I said, it's one of our favorite questions on the show. Not to say that everything else that we've asked is obviously not important or a great question. That said, it's very interesting to listen to folks who've done incredibly well, to hear about what really provides success in the day. And I will share with you that, we're batting 1,000. We're still batting 1,000. So I thank you for keeping our average up. Nobody ever talks about how much money they've made. It always comes back to, can they help other people? And what I just took from your answer there was, by you being able to listen to the questions being asked, do some more learning for yourself. It's the ability to be able to take some of that information and share it back to the audience, which in essence helps them. And I know that we're getting a lot of comments through our private chats here from people that are going, thank you, sigh of relief. This has been great. So people are feeling very positive off of the information that you shared. To me, again, that truly is the definition of success when we can help others. So as we close out here, any last words or tips you can share with our audience today, which is very made up of a lot of our colleagues and real estate industry colleagues, that they can get out there to just help themselves really have a strong year in 2022. Just some final words.
Yes, absolutely. When you are in a situation, and we are in a situation, you tend to exaggerate the impact of that situation. And that's exactly what we're doing now. And I suggest don't do that. Remember, we are in a situation, it will come to an end. Yes, it's taking longer than expected, but it will end. In this sense, life will continue and COVID will be an event, not a condition when it comes to the way you do business, your livelihood, and so on. When it comes to the real estate market, there will be some scary moments in 2022. Interest rates will be rising. The sensitivity to higher interest rates will be exposed. People will be talking about this debt and the higher financing cost. If you are a long-term investor and if you are interested in real estate from a long-term perspective, that should not really impact your willingness to look at the market. There is always value in the real estate market, and those new immigrants will be coming at a rate that we haven't seen before. This year, we are going to get 410,000 new immigrants. Next year, even higher. So I can tell you the demand will be there. The supply will not move as quickly. This market is solid. It might adjust a little bit. And when it adjusts, it will be actually a good opportunity to look into it. That's my advice.
Wonderful advice, incredibly valuable. I know you've shed some wonderful light for everybody today, and I thank you sincerely for joining us on the show today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
You're either listening to this on iTunes, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or Spotify. Or maybe you went to my website, mindshow101.com. And while you're on my site, make sure to download your free copy of the Ultimate Marketing Bundle for Realtors. This is a 31-page ebook packed with a ton of tips and tricks for you. Plus, there's a ready-to-go 90-day social media content counter to help you build more mind share so that you can get more market share. And if you want to talk about personalized one-to-one coaching to help you get to your next level, just get in touch with me. We'll set up a free consultation call to learn more about what you're looking to achieve and how I will help you do just that. Also, don't forget that our push to 100 is on. All you have to do, this is super easy, is go to www.ratethispodcast.com/mindshare101. Again, that's www.ratethispodcast.com/mindshare101. And if you haven't yet, connect with me on Facebook at Mindshare101 and on Instagram at David Greenspan 101. I want to thank Virginia Munden and the Buzz Conference for sponsoring today's episode. Quick note, as I mentioned off the top today, due to provincial legislations, the Buzz has had to reschedule a live in-person Recharge 2022 event, which was set to take place on January 13th at the Mississauga Living Arts Center, to March 31st. More details to come. There will still be a January 13th event, but it is set to be virtual, So be sure to visit their website, www.thebuzzconference.com, and follow them on Instagram at The Buzz Conference to keep tabs on all of the awesome events they're always hosting, along with getting the latest copy of the Buzz digital magazine. And of course, I want to thank Kits Keep in Touch Systems for sponsoring today's episode. If you haven't checked us out yet, just go to my site, mindshare101.com, and click on Marketing. This has been another episode of the Mindshare Podcast. Thank you for tuning in.